to John Green with Bianca.
And Carson. Hey, I'm up here! Today's topic is how Latin America challenged the existing world order.
In the period of the 20th century, the world suffered through two major wars. The Great War was the one that everybody wanted until it happened. Millions of people died, and everyone blames it on Germany. In the Second World War, because of Germany was still mad about being blamed for everything for the First World War, Adolf Hitler came about and was like, you know what? We're going to blame everything, all of our failure, all of Germany's failure on the Jews, and that sparked the Second World War.
Indeed. The horror of the Holocaust brought the United States, USSR, and Great Britain into a mix of opposing the Axis powers. The war was eventually won with 2 atomic bombs that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan. The atomic power that the U.S. possessed really scared the crap out of the USSR, which eventually sparked the Cold War. Dragged the rest of the world into choosing between 2 forms of government, socialist or democratic. It is against this contextual backdrop that the corrupt governments were a cause of socialist regimes and socialist reforms were a cause of military coups throughout Latin America.
Latin American countries did not have the same revolutions as South Asian countries or African countries because of the Monroe Doctrine. But what was the Monroe Doctrine?
Wasn't the Monroe Doctrine when the U.S. stated that they had all imperialistic controls over Latin American countries? The Europeans had really no right to interfere with their territories. This really didn't bode well with certain Latin American countries like Cuba. Wait, is that Nemo? Cuba started off the revolution with an American-backed government run by a man named Fulgencio Batista. Batista promised democratic reforms and other major changes. However, his program of reforms were intoxicated with corruption.
A young lawyer named Fidel Castro was a major opponent towards Batista's regime, and he and some of his followers launched an unsuccessful attack on some of the military barracks. Castro was captured, sent to prison, and upon release he fled to exile in Mexico, only to eventually return in secret solely to build up his army hidden in the mountains. He eventually built up a large army and overthrew Batista and his regime, who was no longer supported by the U.S. because of their corrupt practices. The U.S. thought that Castro was the person who needed to turn Cuba back into the democratic government that it was before. However, he radically decided for Cuba to become a socialist government and received backing from the Soviet Union as a result. This shocked the United States, and they reacted very hostile towards Cuba, but Cuba could handle the hostility as a result of the Soviet Union's backing. However, once the Soviet Union collapsed, the Cuban government began to deteriorate as well.
And now, an open letter to Fidel Castro. But first, let's see what's in the secret compartment. What? A nuke? Take cover! It's just paper. Dear Mr. Castro, do you know what you're like to America? You're like a pesky infestation of termites with a knife. No one likes you or really wants you. I mean, America's trusted you to turn Cuba back into the democratic government that you needed. You know what you did? You took your stupid little knife with your stupid little termite legs and you stabbed us in the back. You turned to the USSR, their rivals. I mean, they were literally in the midst of the Cold War against them. Who even likes the cold anyways? Not only that, after that, you were involved in almost causing a freaking nuclear war on the US. They were literally this close to it happening. After US spy satellites discovered that Cuba had allowed the Soviet Union to build nuclear missiles on their island, leaders of the US and USSR engaged in a tense 13-day political and military standoff in October 1962 over the installation of nuclear-armed Soviet missiles, just 90 miles from the US shores. The US came this close to nuclear crisis, thanks to you. Thankfully, no nukes were launched, and the US agreed to Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev's offer to remove Cuban missiles on the island in exchange for the US promising not to invade Cuba. So screw you, Fidel. Best wishes, fellow American Carson Adams. Another cause and effect was the threat of turning into a socialist regime, causing military takeover. In Brazil, the elected president João Goulart threatened the country with the idea of imposing socialist reforms, and the military acted quickly. Let's go to the picture part.
Fearing what had happened in Cuba, the military government, also supported by the U.S., performed a coup and overthrew the president. After the successful coup, the military ordered martial law on the civilians and silenced any rebellions. The military promised swift action to bring order back into the country, but kept the power until 2 decades later. The military coup marked the period of military oppression on protesters, killing hundreds of people and detaining and torturing countless others. Protesters were suffered from sleep deprivation, mock executions, being left hanging upside down for long hours, and electrocution on fingertips and other painful areas. Thank you. Thought Bubble.
Latin America still suffers from corruption in many of its governments today, and many problems have seeped through. Drugs are a major problem in the area because many of the governments rely on the revenue that the drugs provide to keep the economy stable. Human trafficking has also been a major problem, and that's not been combated by governments in most areas. In Venezuela, the citizens are fighting for survival because after the oil prices dropped, the economy has dropped rapidly. As a result, the Venezuelan socialist system and inflation of consumer goods prevented the government from supplying people with the materials they need. Latin America has the potential to become a booming civilization, and some of its countries are, but others are falling short. Thanks for joining us. You'll never see me again.
Script done by McIntyre. Actors, me, Carson, Bianca, Ramirez. Editing, Bianca, Ramirez. This backflip, that's all me.